I want to start with a confession. I didn't go looking for this. I wasn't chasing water. I was following something else entirely: the food forests, the old-growth systems, and the agricultural networks that seemed to vanish without explanation sometime in the late 19th century. I kept hitting the same wall, the same institutional silence, the same missing transition records. Documents that should exist don't. Photographs that should show something show nothing. And then there is always the redirection toward an official explanation that answers every surface question while somehow never addressing the one underneath. Then, almost by accident, I found the water. I didn't find a river, a reservoir, or a municipal aquifer with a permit date stamped on a county record. I found something older, something that doesn't behave the way water is supposed to behave, something that was there before the cities, before the roads, before the official historical record even bothers to acknowledge that anyone was living in those places at all. Here is what stopped me cold. These sources, scattered across 5 continents and separated by thousands of miles and entirely different geological formations, share one characteristic that no one seems to want to talk about. They are all, in various ways, restricted, sealed, off-limits, heavily managed, or quietly removed from public access under a rotating cast of explanations: environmental protection, mineral rights, sacred designations, military jurisdiction, ongoing scientific research. The explanations change, but the restriction doesn't. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let's start in Mexico, with 2 locations separated by nearly 1,000 miles of desert and mountain, yet connected by something I am still trying to articulate. The first is Hierve el Agua in the highlands of Oaxaca. The site appears from a distance like a frozen waterfall, displaying cascading formations of white and ochre stone spilling over the edge of a cliff face. Except they are not frozen and they are not stone exactly. They are mineral deposits built over time by water that carries enough calcium carbonate to essentially construct its own landscape as it moves through it. The water builds rock in real time, continuously, and without interruption. The official framing calls this a natural mineral precipitation phenomenon, and in the narrowest technical sense, that is accurate. The chemistry is understood, except the formations at Hierve el Agua don't behave like comparable mineral spring sites anywhere else on record. The scale is wrong, the geometry is wrong, and the distribution of mineral buildup follows patterns that begin to suggest a deliberate orientation, as if the water is being directed somewhere specific. The terraced pools at the top show signs of modification that predate any colonial record, and the full spring network above and beyond the tourist terraces is restricted, not developed, not open, and not mapped in any publicly available form. Older oral records from the Zapotec tradition describe a spring that wasn't just building rock, but the spring that was, by some accounts, responding to season, to use, and to the presence of the surrounding agricultural system. It suggests that the mineral formations weren't an incidental byproduct, but something closer to output. The spring was expressing in stone whatever it was processing. If it's just mineral-rich water flowing downhill, why does the upper network require restriction at all? Drive north through Coahuila into the Chihuahuan Desert, one of the most arid environments in North America, and you reach Cuatro Ciénegas. At some point, the desert simply stops making sense. In a valley with no geological reason to contain water, a network of spring-fed pools and rivers emerges from the earth. The official explanation collapses here almost immediately because the geological conditions don't account for what is present. Researchers who have been granted access to the spring system have noted something in the water chemistry that doesn't appear anywhere else. The mineral composition shifts in ways that suggest the system is doing something internally, processing, adjusting, and maintaining a chemical equilibrium that has no obvious source. More than the water itself, consider the things living in it. Organisms like stromatolites and microbial mats live here, genetically distinct from anything else found on Earth. Their lineage predates every known timeline for complex life in this hemisphere. Independent research at Cuatro Ciénegas is heavily restricted, and access to the full spring network requires governmental authorization. The public can observe only portions, while the deeper subterranean connections remain officially under ongoing, indefinitely incomplete research. The pattern repeats with unsettling precision when we move to southern Oregon, to a body of water so strikingly blue it looks like something generated by software, Crater Lake. The official narrative is clean and confident. Roughly 7,700 years ago, a massive volcanic peak known as Mount Mazama collapsed in on itself following a catastrophic eruption, creating a caldera that gradually filled with rainfall and snowmelt. No rivers flow into it, and no rivers flow out. It is sustained entirely by precipitation. Yet the water clarity at Crater Lake is extraordinary, with visibility depths of over 100 feet. For a closed basin lake with no inflow and no outlet, this creates a problem that geologists have been quietly puzzling over for decades. Closed systems accumulate minerals, sediment, and biological material, causing them to cloud and stratify over time. Crater Lake doesn't do this. Furthermore, the lake exhibits hydrothermal vent activity on its floor, continuously introducing heat and mineral content from below. Hydrothermal vents in every other body of water alter the surrounding chemistry in measurable, significant ways. At Crater Lake, this effect appears to be neutralized and counteracted, as if something in the system is processing what comes in from below and maintaining equilibrium. That is not what closed volcanic lakes do. That is what engineered systems do. Is it possible that what we're looking at is not a geological accident, but the surviving remnant of something designed to work exactly this way? Now think about Beppu, Japan, a city sitting atop one of the most concentrated geothermal spring systems on Earth. The city's entire infrastructure is organized around this underground network, as if the city was built for the springs rather than the springs being incidental to the city. Yet there are springs in Beppu that are permanently, categorically restricted. The most well-known of these are the Jigoku, or the Hells, a series of dramatically colored thermal pools. 7 of these pools are maintained as tourist attractions, but there are others that don't appear on the tourist maps. What stopped in the late 1800s was the documentation. In a modern city equipped with ground-penetrating radar and satellite thermal imaging, the full extent of what is flowing under Beppu remains officially unknown. Meiji-era surveys from the 1870s and 1880s contain descriptions of spring behaviors, temperature variations, and output volumes that don't match current readings. It forces us to ask whether the springs of Beppu were in some meaningful way modified, reduced, or partially sealed during that period. The Plitvice Lakes in Croatia do something that reframes everything. It features 16 terraced lakes connected by waterfalls and cascades, lined and continuously shaped by travertine barriers. These limestone deposits are precipitated out of the water by a specific combination of microorganisms, mineral chemistry, and flow dynamics. These barriers are not static, they grow and shift, reshaping the course of the water. The system modifies its own architecture in real time. Natural systems don't usually maintain stability through constant self-modification. They tend toward entropy. Yet Plitvice has been in a state of continuous self-maintenance for as long as historical records extend. The lakes don't fill in and they don't drain into a single basin. Large portions of this system are designated as restricted research zones, and the subsurface channels connecting the lakes remain substantially unmapped. When you start mapping what we are not being shown, the public faces of these systems, the tourist walkways, the admission-priced attractions, the rim trails, begin to look like a managed reveal. It is a curated presentation that shows you enough to satisfy the surface question while keeping the actual mechanism out of view. We see the same pattern independently across 5 continents in systems managed by institutions with no formal connection to each other. What if the restriction isn't about protecting the public from the water, but about protecting something in the water or something the water does from scrutiny? What if these sources were foundational to the ancient agricultural networks that vanished in the same historical window? Shut down access to the water, and you shut down the evidence that a different relationship between human civilization and natural systems once existed. The official story assumes that complexity came after us, that the world was simpler before us, and that the systems we encounter are either natural accidents or modern constructions. But the water doesn't behave like an accident, and it isn't modern. The question isn't whether these sources are being kept from us, the question is why. What is the continued concealment protecting unless the mechanism itself is still operating underground? The springs may still be doing what they were always doing, acting as the last operational components of a self-sustaining system we no longer have a name for, quietly maintaining an equilibrium that no one is allowed close enough to observe.